Thank you so much for coming on the show on the second, maybe it's the third ever Glass Half Full. How are you two doing?
Thank you.
We're hanging on. We're hanging in here.
Now, if I could get both of you ladies for the audience out there who may not be familiar with you, can each of you give me a little bit of your background, your work, where your passions lie, etc., and what you're currently up to?
Sure, I'll start. My name is Cruz. I'm originally from Douglas, Arizona. I live right now in Queens, New York. I live just a couple of blocks within walking distance of Elmhurst Hospital. Kind of wanted to talk about what's going on with COVID-19 in New York. But professionally, I'm an immigrant rights activist. And I do legal advocacy for children, unaccompanied minors who are in immigration detention in New York. And a great portion of those children have been separated from their families.
And my name is Inti. I'm originally from Bolivia, and I migrated with my mom when I was 2 years old. I've been living in Queens ever since. And I also live maybe 7 blocks from Elmhurst Hospital, where a lot of the concentration of folks who are seeking support for COVID-19 are going. And it's surrounded by neighborhoods that are largely immigrant, low-wage, working class families. And I counsel high school students at a local high school here. And I also volunteer in different spaces in the neighborhood and organize with different labor, immigrant, and community centers.
Cool. Ladies, let's just jump straight into the main topic at hand that has basically affected the entire world. We could all get, and all I have out here is, for myself, is with many people outside of the New York area, all we have is, your nightly news and whatnot. But, from your own experiences, what has life been like for the past 3 weeks, the past month and a half? Just from what you're seeing from actually being there.
Sure. So I got sick actually after working at a detention center on the 10th. And then I found out last week that 2 of my colleagues tested positive for COVID-19. So I got really sick really fast. I wasn't able to get tested because my symptoms weren't really severe. But it was really scary because it's the first time ever where I wasn't allowed to go to the hospital. You had to call first. So these are like totally different protocols. It kind of put me in a panic, to be honest, because for me, my disaster planning is that, okay, if anything happens, I live close to Elmhurst Hospital. Or if anything happens, I live like a 10-minute bus ride from LaGuardia and from JFK. So I'm like local in a place where if I need to escape for a disaster, I can do that. Now all the options are gone. You can't go to the hospital. You have to call ahead. At the time I was wheezing, and the doctor was like, we're going to give you some steroids, but honestly, unless like you're really, really sick, we're not going to be able to admit you. And what I learned was that at New York Presbyterian, they were like turning away hundreds of people who were like, kind of like in my situation with the high fever, wheezing. I have, type 2 diabetes. So I was just like really concerned. And for me, it was a cough that I've never had before, fatigue that I've never had before. And I'm by myself. So my roommate is a seasonal worker and he is stuck quarantined by himself. All my family's in Arizona. I would tell my family and friends like, hey, this virus is serious. And people are like, kind of making jokes about it and like, oh, tequila, bacanora is going to get rid of this coronavirus. And I'm like, no, it's really bad. And I would just say like, a couple of weeks ago, I found myself sobbing because I could hear this parade of sirens from my house. And it was just like, what was happening. And then we got reports and I would, recommend for people to start like listening to like Democracy Now, not CNN, but Democracy Now, they were like point in saying like, hey, they have refrigerated trucks parked by Elmhurst Hospital to, to store the bodies, and that they're turning people away, and that doctors are sick and doctors are crying and they don't have their protective equipment. So again, I'm by myself here, and I felt, very sad, overwhelmed. And then I had to stop myself and think like, this quote Mr. Rogers said was like, when you're scared, find the helpers. And so when I was on Facebook, I saw Inti's post. And so I know like from like knowing her and working with her like on a couple of community projects, that like her sources are valid, and that it's not pseudoscience, it's like reports coming from the community. And she was also very vulnerable in sharing like, this is how it is in New York. So for me to reach out, like that was the best thing I could do, to tell you the truth, to have like that solidarity of concern about what's going on.
How are you feeling now, and how are your two friends that tested positive?
I think they're improving. So they have like different symptoms. So for COVID-19, there's people that apparently just, they get the respiratory symptoms really bad. Others don't, but they have this like fatigue. And then there are other folks that have like, they start off with like gastrointestinal things. But I wasn't able to get tested. But you'll see a lot of celebrities and well-to-do people have access to these tests. But just to know that like, just to let you know, like I do have what I call like a lingering corona cough. And this is like week 4. And I call like corona brain, where I'm like, I can't focus. Right now as we speak, I have like Post-its everywhere to keep on task. So it's something that my body's still fighting.
Cool. And in time, I imagine you'll eventually get, when you can, you'll get to a test when they're finally able to administer one to you, I imagine, right?
I don't know. We'll see. I'm not a priority, and I'm fine. I'm happy to recuperate at home safely. But it would be dangerous for me, because I do have an underlying medical condition, to go to the hospital. I don't want to do that. And I haven't had a fever in 11 days, so that's good news.
That's good. So you felt at least no fever for 11 days. I remember you were telling me. What is it about, for example, out here in Arizona, our numbers were barely starting to go up about 2-3 weeks ago. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to say the East Coast is about a month ahead of us, or maybe 3 weeks ahead of us with regards to everything that you're experiencing. Is it maybe denial with regards to some people who've never had to thought about experiencing something like this? That I mean, what can you say, I guess, with regards to reactions like that? Like, because I'm pretty sure it's not just your family. I'm pretty sure it's a lot of other people. I've heard from certain sources that here in town that, for whatever reason, people say, the whole flu thing, like, well, the flu kills X amount of people every single year. And so they try to normalize or rationalize it, or I don't know what exactly it's called that they're trying to do when they bring that up. But why do you think it is that people do that? Do you think I think it's a form of denial, because it quite has not altered life out here the way it has out there. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think you have a president who is a sociopath, who is basically telling people that, this is something that's going to go away magically. The country's going to reopen after Easter. And then you have mainstream media, like it's kind of difficult. Well, not even mainstream media. I want to talk about like the attorney, not the attorney general, but the surgeon general.
Surgeon General.
And also like the Surgeon General, where they have to compliment the president before like giving facts. And they do it in such a way where they're like on edge, because anything you say that's critical against the president, you can get fired, or you'll get death threats and you'll need a security detail. But yeah, Inti, how is it going on your side of Queens?
Well, I don't think we're that far from each other. So, I hear sirens, I think all through the night, all morning, all day while I'm like working and making phone calls to students. And I think also, Edgar, to answer your question about why I think people reproduce that, I think it's several things. I think it's really complicated. I don't think that there's one answer. I think a lot of it has to do with denial about that ever happening or anything catastrophic ever happening in this country, because we're told that, no one will ever touch us. Nothing will ever happen here. And I think that the other part of it is people's denial about what could happen. And, I remember the weekend that we were sent home. So I think it was like Friday the 13th, everybody that entire week we were all alarmed at work. And some kid in some school drank hand sanitizer. So then they banned hand sanitizers at schools, at all public schools, like on Tuesday. So I was worried because, our school is really small and there's only 200 kids in the high school, but they share one bathroom.
Oh,
So
wow.
I was concerned about, they can't wash their hands all the time. So I went home and I was like, I know how to make like natural hand sanitizer with no alcohol. So I made some. I still have it. And I took it to work and I put it and I sit in the common area because it's easier for me to interact with students that way than if I were to sit in my office all day where they wouldn't see me and wouldn't know where I was. And I put it out there and I just said, like, please use it every time you come out of class. And they were all like pumping. And so the next day I refilled it and brought some more back. And I think it's also just fear, and I think it was shocking to see adults in my workplace, but also in my community, reject this alarm and see how different, teenagers responded to it. A lot of the students I work with were like, Inti, I'm really worried about, us having to come to school on Monday. Luckily, schools were closed after Friday, but, they were concerned about coming into school and they were saying, because I live with my grandmother or I live with my mom who has an underlying health condition and I don't want to infect them. And I think it was like, it's shocking to think about back then, and this was 3 weeks ago,
Yeah.
to think about how much more aware teenagers were, I think, than adults. And there's a local bar that I spend time at sometimes, and the owner, who is a doctor but hasn't practiced for maybe over 20 years, from Colombia, on his Facebook, he posted, why are we believing the news? And then used, that we live under a president who throws out false information all the time. Mind you, he was not saying that this information was accurate. He was actually saying it was a hoax, right? His information was false too. And he was saying, I'm a doctor. I know the flu kills more people than COVID, blah, blah, blah. And then, people started commenting and saying, like, I think this is really messed up. And I think that this is your way of staying open so that you don't accumulate debt. I don't think that you're thinking about people's health in this situation. And, lo and behold, his workers are suffering. And they had to file for unemployment, those of them who did qualify. And those who did not, have no way and are hopefully okay. But it's just been really difficult. I think it's difficult to stop thinking about it. And I really appreciate the like theme around this podcast, because I think it is hard to sometimes think outside of a lot of the negative or the facts that are scary and the anxiety driven news that you're encountered all the time. Like I was talking to my therapist 2 weeks ago and she was like, what are you doing to, step away or steer away from all of this stuff that's giving you anxiety? And I was thinking, and I was like, okay, yeah, my therapist is smart. She's telling me to think different. And I said, well, I should create boundaries and tell people not to send me, a lot of alarming news, but it's impossible because you log on to social media and you see it. My mom will send me an article. My school principal will send us an article, and they're all alarming, right? So, but I think it's important to try and think about what are the ways that we build community with the people that we do know, and what are we doing in our communities while the government is not responding the way that they should.
And to add to the reactions, I guess people had, as a person who works in the media, an observer of media trends, like when I want to say that this is not a common thing that we've had to deal with, thankfully, as a country and as a nation. The way that we see other people deal with these type of things, with the frequency that they deal with them in other countries. Let me give you an example. SARS, swine flu, bird flu, West Nile. There's probably 2 or 3 other ones that I'm not thinking about now. But the thing is, I met one person who did get swine flu, and that person, she told me what it was like. It was a horrible version of the flu, but she got through it and she's fine, thankfully. But what I'm getting at is, for a lot of these other ones, we've been blessed to not have to deal with being the images that we see on TV of, maybe in some Asian country where, they've got the mask on, and, it's just a 1-minute segment in the news, and then it's on to the next thing. And then maybe a month later, we're not hearing about it anymore, and it's gone. And it was never a thing that we had to deal with. And I think now what's different is that for one of the few times in our generation, in our nation's history, we have to contend with this reality. And I think that's a lot for people to handle. So that's where maybe the human brain kicks in the denial or the comedy. A lot of us have dealt with this, and I'm guilty of doing it too. Look into comedy, and the comedy that's coming out of, like, the clever memes and everything, but we've also seen all the other one too, out of, I think, a website called Higher Perspective, that says just because I'm dealing in comedy doesn't mean that I think it's not serious, or that I'm not taking it seriously, etc. But so that's what I think. I think we've been basically blessed to not have to be in this situation as often as other countries, and so that's kind of a silver lining that I see, at least with regards to that topic, is if you really think about it, we're blessed to not be in this position that often. So it really does put things into perspective, at least for me. Like, wow, we do live in a country where, like, the hygiene standards are, I guess they're higher, to where we're not dealing with this on a regular basis.